Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Alder Hour. It's 8 o'clock here in Scotland. I know it's lots of different times everywhere else, but this is still your favourite way to end the working day. I'm Matt Alder. I'm the host of the Recruiting Future podcast, and I'm also very privileged to be the host of the Alder Hour. This show is part of the Purple Acorn Network. If you head over to purpleacornnetwork.com after the show, not now, you can learn all about the other great shows that we do. You can follow Purple Acorn on LinkedIn. And also, this episode is also available as a podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Now, if you're watching live, and we sincerely hope you are, you can join in just to prove that this is live and we've not pre-recorded it. You can join in, leave us some comments, and we will do our best to read them, make you part of the show. And we've got some really interesting topics that we're talking about this week. I know I've got lots to say about them, and I hope you do too. So without further ado, I would like to welcome my amazing co-hosts to tonight's Alder Hour. Hey, and we're all here again. Hi, Rona. Hi, Jocelyn. How are you doing?
Hey, Matt. Doing good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. It's been very sunny the last few days in Scotland, which is, I think that's a Scottish summer done now. So it was good while it lasted. Jocelyn, how are you?
Doing really well. Yeah, can't complain. In the Florida weather, which is perpetually sunny, although we are starting to get into the rainy season a little bit, but I won't complain to you.
There we are. You see, I couldn't be more British if I tried, because all I can think about is to ask about the weather, which is what we always do. And we haven't been to a conference this week, so that for a change, which is good to have a rest. So Justin, what do you have for us this evening?
We're going to talk a little bit about. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about mental health and workplace violence. It is all one story. It's actually my story. I know we always do Reddit, and there's some pretty fun things to find on there. But this was earlier on in my career, and I had an employee who very, very unfortunately tried to commit suicide at work, and then threatened violence afterward when he was unsuccessful. So we'll talk more about that.
Absolutely, how you deal with that as an HR professional. Rona, what do you have for us?
So I'm talking about the death of the traditional resume, and I've been trying to have it disappear for years. So hopefully,
I think I said just before we went live, I started writing about this in 2008. In fact, that's the earliest I can find that I've written about it. I think I probably wrote about it before. So fascinating topic. Can't wait to get into it. But and we've got a great guest coming up a little bit later as well. So let's get started, and it's time for Points and Pints. Right, so I'm departing from show tradition this week. I actually have a bottle of beer. Where's my camera? I have a bottle of beer, just like the indent. Now, this is a beer called Doom Bar. This used to be my favourite beer a few years ago. It's supposed to be from Cornwall, which is where I'm originally from, in the southwest of England. But it got bought by a big conglomerate. I think it's now brewed hundreds of miles away from there. But this is the first time I've tried the alcohol-free version, and it really is alcohol-free. It's alcohol zero, 0.0%. Although, riddle me this, when I bought it in the supermarket, they still had to do an age check to check that I was old enough to buy 0% beer. There's a conundrum. Right, let me open this. Could be quite tricky. At least I remember to bottle open that. All right. What's everyone else got to drink while I'm pouring this? Let me know. Rona, do you have something?
Yeah, I have the last of the free AF drinks that I have. This is the vodka spritz one.
Finally at the end of the case.
Yeah.
That's cool. Jocelyn, do you have anything, or are you on your usual water this week?
No, I'm a little rebellious this week, just a little bit, because I actually do have alcohol. Not a lot. It's a Michelob Ultra. Of course, my screen, everybody knows what it looks like anyway. And so I haven't had a sip yet, but I'm going to now for you, Matt.
Right. Oh, thank you. Right. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to try. This is a monumentous moment. This used to be my favorite beer. Do I like the alcohol-free version? That's very good. That is very good. I'm delighted at that. I wish I bought a case. How does it compare to Michelob Ultra, which is practically alcohol-free anyway, isn't it?
It is practically alcohol-free. Yeah, it's mostly water. It's still delicious, but I'm sure it doesn't rival what you've just tried, Matt.
Absolutely. And the vodka, the fake, is it fake vodka or real vodka?
It's fake vodka,
vodka,
and
yeah.
it's actually really good.
That's cool. Excellent. So, well, that's the pints part done. Now onto the points. So first up, this has been kind of all over everywhere all week. Why Moderna merged its tech and HR departments. Now, you can't sort of turn the internet on these days without being hit by a story about AI. I've noticed that the news tends to go in 2 weekly cycles. We'll have a week where AI is brilliant and it's taking over, and that'll be followed by a week where AI is rubbish and it doesn't work, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think a shout out to Klarna for being in both of those news cycles, basically, which is cool. So this is somewhat different, I think. This is Moderna, the pharmaceutical company, and what they've done is they've merged their technical department and their HR department, and perhaps most importantly, they've put the chief people officer in charge. Now, serious company. They've been working with OpenAI for 2 or 3 years. This isn't a kind of a gimmick or something trying to get some get some spin or stuff like that. This is a serious strategic decision that they've made, and I think it's absolutely fascinating, and it's really interesting because about 3 or 4 weeks ago I spoke to a CHRO. It's supposed to be alcohol free, that drink. A CHRO on my podcast who said then that they felt that HR was at the absolute point where technology met people when it comes to how work's done and should be in charge. And then lo and behold, 3 weeks later, we start getting headlines like this. So a bit more background. In the article, it talks about them having 3,000 GPTs. Presumably, we could call those agents working across the business. All of their kind of HR service model is kind of outsourced to these AIs. And I think it's really interesting. A few years ago, in my last book, I wrote about something called total talent management, which was looking at how work got done and the skills you needed within an organization. And those skills can be provided by robots, via AI. So it kind of makes sense to me. And also, I think from an HR perspective, there's a lot here about managing that transition between people doing work and AI doing work in certain departments, and that's complex. So I think this is a really interesting move. I'll be interested to see how it plays out. I'll also be interested to see whether other HR departments and chief people officers are actually prepared or ready to step up into this kind of role, or whether the chief technology officer will be running HR in their organization. So a huge amount to digest here. Jocelyn, what do you think from an HR perspective?
Yeah, this is huge, and I don't think it's something that people should be surprised about, because we've been talking about this more and more over the last, especially the last year. But I find this really interesting because the only way you'd be able to successfully do this, and Moderna, as you said, is a serious company, so they're going to do this successfully, is if their HR leader is capable of managing a technology department. I understand why they're doing it. And a lot of people say, oh, it's because, AI is going to be replacing the workforce, so it's going to kind of be the workforce. It's so much more than that. It's the change management aspect that kind of falls underneath HR. And then, of course, there's policy and security and data protection and governance, compliance. And I can understand how some of that might fall underneath HR as well. But they have to have that tech savviness know-how in order to be successful in a role like this. So I think it'll be really interesting to see, how many of these companies are going to do this because they know their HR department is prepared, and how many are going to do this because it's like a new fad that's come out and it's going to completely blow up in their face.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to sort of read the background. And the chief people officer was already working very closely with the chief technology officer, and the chief technology officer actually left and that's why they kind of did it like this. So there was kind of a almost like a sensible progression in terms of doing this. It wasn't just suddenly they kind of put these things together, and that's the sort of thing that doesn't turn up in these headlines normally. Rona, what's your view?
I absolutely laughed and like was overjoyed when I saw this article because, as you know, many years ago, I transitioned from tech, from IT to TA. And I remember all the people saying, like, oh my gosh, you're leaving so much money on the table. You're going to waste your intelligence because you're not going to use your tech skills in HR and stuff like that. And I was like, this is where we're going. Obviously, I couldn't know that this is where we would end up, but it was a group of us who did that change. And I just remembered when I read this article, it's like it makes 100% total sense for everything that you guys have said. I absolutely loved that the CPO was in charge, because when I've had this conversation in the past, people always think like, oh, the technical person is going to be in charge. And don't get me wrong, I do agree that it has to be a technical person. It doesn't mean it has to be the CTO or the CIO. It means that the skills needed to be in HR now, especially if you aspire to be an executive, are so different than they were just a few years ago. And it will continue to be this way and go this route because of everything that we said: AI, change management, policies, everything. I really think that our counterparts, CTO, CIOs, like cybersecurity people, although they're very good at that specific aspect, they're not necessarily experienced in the HR space. So anyone who's moved from tech or these types of things, or anyone who's tech savvy and is in HR TA area, is someone to look out for.
I think you've done yourself out of a massive thing there. You could have said you foresaw this, which is why you moved from tech to HR.
My crystal
Right.
ball.
No one heard. So this is what you foresaw. And finally, for as long as I've been working, I was going to say in this industry, but for as long as I've been working, HR has been demanding a seat at the table. So here you go, CHROs. Here it is. Here's your seat. But you're going to have to really think about how that works and how you work in order to take it. So let's move on to the next article so I can have some more of this lovely beer. Okay, so as I said right at the beginning, we're in this kind of news cycle where 1 week we get AI is rubbish and 1 week we get AI is changing the world. So we've put that news cycle into this 15-minute section, and here we are. New study finds AI hiring systems may be discriminating. Now, I read this in some detail because it's about the third report I've read in the last 7 days on this topic. It doesn't really tell us anything new. There's a lot of could, should, maybe, all that sort of stuff. I think that anyone sort of working in this space, who's even vaguely up with what's going on, won't be surprised by anything that's here. The one thing that really stood out in this article, though, for me was this. Let me find it. This one line, and it said. Oh, here we go. The published study found that AI tools often penalize candidates for employment gaps. Let's soak that in, because humans never do that, do they? And again, I think a lot of the things that get thrown up in these kind of reports are things that human recruiters do anyway, or companies do systematically, and that never kind of quite gets quite gets addressed. And I think that there is some complexity to this. So let me back up from that, actually. So I think that we know that certainly in Europe there is regulation about this. I would have said that there is regulation in the US, but I think there's been some developments this week around no regulation for 10 years or something like that. But I think that's probably another conversation altogether. So as I said, I don't think it tells us anything that we don't know. However, I think this is a complicated situation. I think with AI, we're seeing this kind of bouncing around in the news cycle because very often people are just comparing things that shouldn't be compared. Things are getting put together that shouldn't be put together. People are using AI really badly and saying that's how it is. Because I had another study that landed in my inbox about AI assessments, and in that. one of the things it said was conversational AI significantly reduces social desirability bias, which is people saying what they think people want to hear, and delivers a better candidate experience and offers a fairer path to talent discovery. So really, really sort of complex kind of area. I think that sometimes these kind of bits of research are kind of lumping matching, selection, testing, and interviewing together into kind of one sort of lump that says hiring. What do you think? Rona, what do you think on this one?
I mean, of course, we all knew that this was an issue. I go back to like, where did AI learn all of these issues with employment gaps and all the issues that it has? I think, like you said, recruiters have been doing this and hiring managers and everyone for a long time. AI is just saying the quiet parts out loud, actually like doing it, and it's like in our face. I think with I disagree with the whole the AI interviews are better candidate experience and all of that. I don't know if you checked out Mike Petito's video that he did where he literally like recorded himself in one of these AI interviews, and just the back and forth that he was having and like being difficult, or just like being a regular candidate, because by the way, candidates aren't all easy to talk to in interviews, and you have to pivot and stuff like that. AI can't do that. So I don't know. I don't think we're there where it's like 100% taking over. Definitely there's going to be steps, and I think there's iterations of how we're going to be using AI. It's not going to be this whole takes over, no humans involved type of thing, because we're already seeing that there's a long road for it to be that way. And I think before the smarter thing to do than trying to go that route is to try to figure out how and what parts it can actually take over, and then do that, and not try to like make this into something it can't be.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a discussion for another time. But I did discover, I think, on the back of Mike's bit of content, that the trend for people TikToking AI interviews.
Yes, yeah, I did a whole
That was a thing.
podcast episode about that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe we'll come to that separately. But Justin, give us your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that this is even an article that's popping up like it's something new. I think algorithmic bias has been a really big concern for a very long time. And to Rona's points, like, how are they training these AI models? Are they training these AI models maybe even inadvertently to be discriminating against somebody because of an employment gap? I mean, what if that was an employment gap because it was a stay-at-home mom who had to take some time off, or because she was on maternity leave or paternity leave for that matter? And, it was a small company and FMLA didn't, apply. So they kind of lost their jobs, right? That type of stuff happens. And so to discriminate against them is a huge liability to a business on top of it all. So where they're getting their data from, how they're training their AI model is really critical for HR professionals, TA leaders to know about when they are vetting these types of tools. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see more and more issues, but nobody should be surprised by it.
No, absolutely. Okay, quite the situation. So let's move on to the Situation Room. Okay, Justin, tell us the story.
Okay, so this was actually early on in my career. I was working for a company. We had a lot of employees, and there was one employee who had a lot of mental health challenges going on. Without going into any detail about that, he was really struggling, and so I'd kind of taken him under my wing and was really trying to support him and provide resources and just be that person he can talk to when he needed that. And so I think he felt very kind of comfortable and in some ways almost like a little attached. And one day he tried committing suicide at the workplace, and very, very fortunately was unsuccessful. And we called the police, 911, ambulance came, they did a 24-hour watch. The next day I was working, I was the only manager there. He knew that was the schedule, and he came into my office and locked the door and said he was really angry with me for calling the police and that he wanted to hurt me. Uh, and that was obviously a really scary moment. I spent the next couple hours de escalating and convincing him to actually admit himself into the hospital. But it's a really sad story. And I wish I knew where he was today and if he was okay, but obviously didn't, stay in touch for those reasons. But very sad. And so I think that, it's Mental Health Month. A lot of people are talking about, how we can better support our employees with their mental health. And certainly part of this story reflects that, right?
Mm,
That
mm.
that we should be, keeping track of our employees, and if and actually the reason why I even knew about his challenges in the first place is because his manager came to me and said, "Hey, he's mentioned to me that he's depressed. I think he should have a conversation with you." Managers need to step up and do that because it's really critical to kind of be there to support employees. And HR isn't going to know everything that's going on, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even though some people joke and say we do, we don't.
Mm.
Um, so the other thing, though, that I think often goes unnoticed or untouched during Mental Health Awareness Month is mental health for HR professionals, because we end up taking on some pretty significant emotional burdens from employees. Gladly, it's part of why we got into a profession of service, because that's how I see human resources, as a profession of service to others. Um, and I also think that there's a lack of crisis management training for HR professionals as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Matt, crisis management, or how to better support HR professionals with their own mental health. But I do think it's really critical for key leaders across the organization to be very aware and cognizant of the fact that HR is assuming a lot of emotions that are coming their way. And it's a really tough job, and you can't talk to other people about it. It's a really lonely job, and your time is spent taking care of others and not necessarily taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we talked that aspect of it. We've talked about this a few times actually with some of the stories that have come up, that HR have to deal with this stuff. If there's loads of layoffs, HR know they're coming and they know the personal impact it might have on people. Those people might even be their friends in the workplace. And it's always seemed to me that there was just this huge burden on HR, A, not to say anything, and B, to, as you say, these are these are all kind of emotions and human issues that people feel. It's impossible, I think, to not have empathy or get emotionally involved to some extent. So, from that perspective, I think that it's really important that HR get that support. I think the crisis management one is another big thing. We've got a mental health crisis going on pretty much all over the world at the moment for various reasons, and it's kind of just really important that people are able to help people and pick up on that really early. I suppose coming back to you on that, so in that situation, that's obviously a very traumatic situation that's affected you personally. Did you get any support from your employer around that, or were you supposed to just kind of soak it up and carry on?
Honestly, I ended up leaving
Mm,
because
mm,
I was so distraught over the whole situation. And um, I don't feel like I got that level of support. I remember shortly afterward, I actually applied to grad school, and part of my application was about the lack of crisis management training in the workplace. So I look back on that now and think, like, yeah, maybe I wasn't getting everything I needed.
mm, mm,
But it was a really, really sad situation. And I think that at the time I was still relatively new to HR. I uh, was incredibly empathetic to employees, incredibly empathetic. I took their problems home with me.
mm.
And after that, I think I became a little more jaded. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing,
Yeah.
because I was able to kind of remain sympathetic, but remove that empathy to allow me to very clearly evaluate a situation and handle it. Not that I didn't in this case, but just kind of moving forward in the future, I found that to be really helpful. So there's a good lesson learned out of the story at the end of the day. But but yeah, I do think it's really critical that employers be prepared to support HR in time, especially in times of need, right? Like during COVID, for
Mm,
example, or
mm.
if there's a mental health crisis and your geographic area in particular, or in your workplace, or just as you've kind of said, all around the world. How are we also supporting HR too? I don't think that's talked about often enough.
So, just give us some practical sort of tips around that. What is it you think employers should have in place to to deal with this? Because I'm kind of thinking of other professions like medical profession, emergency services. And I know that there are lots of stories about those professions not having this kind of support available in the past, but I'm sure that situation's improved. What should companies have in place to support HR for situations like this?
I do think it depends on the company, right? If you work in manufacturing, your experience is going to be very different than working in technology. But in general, I do think having some form of crisis management training that's appropriate for that industry is really critical. Unfortunately, you generally will tend to have more of those types of issues in certain industries than you would with others. So that's why it can't just be, this blanket solution across the board. But I also think that there are things that everybody can do. For example, training executives on how to better support managers and HR practitioners who are taking on a brunt of the kind of emotional energy that's coming their way from employees. How can they better support them and create some type of program for that? Maybe even, some version of an employee support group, right? Or an employee resource group or something along those lines. So I think that would be really helpful. And then just an overall awareness culturally for other leaders in the organization to have that this is something that comes up. And often when they feel like maybe they're having friction with HR, perhaps there's more to the story there.
And I think also that thing you said about de-escalation kind of resonated as well because we are in a world where people get very angry at things maybe a lot quicker than they used to. Social media, politics, whatever it is. And I'll imagine it's kind of really important to have those kind of de-escalation skills as well that are probably common in other professionals, but perhaps not HR.
Absolutely. And I would hope that would sit under the crisis management training that's provided to them. But that's another example of something that I think every single HR practitioner and manager could benefit from. In fact, any employee as well could benefit from too. You're still going to have altercations between employees. And so if they're able to kind of move forward and use the training that's being provided to them in a really positive way for their organization and most especially for themselves, then that's a big win for a company. So I would say, just regardless of the industry that you're in, please don't underestimate the importance of crisis management training for, not just HR, but other levels in the organization too.
Yeah, incredibly important. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And yeah, your amazing insight there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to it's time for our guest. Here he is. Hey, Jamie, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. How you doing, buddy?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Have you had alcohol-free Doom Bar? This is
No,
my first
I've never
time.
touched alcohol-free beer in my life. Anyone that knows
Oh,
me will
you're,
back
you're
that up.
missing. You're missing out. You're missing out. I used to
Well,
have
I'm
that.
on I'm on the water because I didn't drink non-alcoholic beer this weekend. I've
Oh
done
dear.
the other stuff, and that's why I'm
Well,
drinking the water now.
no, it was nice weather.
It
Cool. Okay,
was.
so first of all, then introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do.
So my name's Jamie Leonard. I am the co-founder and CEO of the recruitment events company. We are probably best known for RecFest, both in the UK and in the US, and we also have the largest network of TA leaders in the world, which is the RL 100 RL community.
And that works across the UK, the US, and the Middle East, doesn't it?
Yeah, so very established in the UK, 2 or 3 years established in the Middle East, and just launching now in the US. So first year doing it properly.
Fantastic. So talk about RecFest a little bit later on, but before that, you kind of have quite a unique situation because you run events for TA leaders, all over the world, and
Yep.
you get to listen to. You have these kind of particularly sort of really great networking events where people share what's going on without kind of fear of that being broadcast on social media or outside the room. So, I've certainly attended loads of your events, but I've attended ones where there've been some really interesting conversations about how people are feeling about TA and how it's going in their future and all that kind of stuff. What are you seeing at the moment? What's going on in TA from the TA leaders' perspective? What are the big topics? What are people talking about?
Sure. I'd say the first thing is it really kind of breaks down into a few different sets. I think you've got obviously still a lot of people looking to get back into work at the moment, which is a decent amount of those people. And there's a question whether or not we'll ever have as many jobs in TA as we've had before. I don't think we will. That's my gut feel. I think we are now in a shrinking market in terms of headcount, and we can talk more about that. I think there's those that are in organizations that are moving very quickly around automation and AI. And I think there's two schools of thought. There's either we'll wait to see what the business does, or there's we need to act now to get on top of it sooner rather than later. When I speak to job seekers at the moment, I say, you need to have some sort of case study under your belt about how you've adopted AI into talent acquisition. Because if I'm hiring a TA leader right now, or I'm hiring a manager, or even a recruiter, the first thing I'm asking is, what was the last thing you did with AI? Because it's the mega shift. I think there's real concern at the moment on a lot of different levels. I think from how do we deal with the job seekers that are currently deep faking themselves and using ChatGPT just under their screen to give the best possible answers. I think there's what's going to happen with our teams, because let's be fair, TA is a very process driven industry, and AI eats process. We're already seeing big chunks of the talent acquisition market and those roles being eaten up and never coming back. We used to have people that took notes at interviews. That's not coming back. We used to have people that scheduled interviews. That's not coming back. And one by one, you're starting to see these roles become obsolete. And I just don't know whether we're catching up on the other side quick enough. That means that we will maintain the amount of heads that we currently have in the market. We're almost losing jobs quicker than we're working out what to do with the AI. So
100%.
yeah, it's some are excited, some are very, very nervous. I think, look, in the UK right now, the market is very, very tough. There's not a lot of hiring going on right now. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's either people seeing it as an opportunity or threat, and they're becoming quite polarized in terms of their opinion.
Yeah, and I know you've been listening backstage. I presume you've been listening backstage. Apologies
Absolutely.
if you're listening to something else. But what did you think of that Moderna story? That sort of the CPO taking over the tech department and the HR department. Is that where we're going?
I don't know enough about the HR side to make credible comment. But what I will say is, that question has come up before, which is ultimately, what is an employee? An employee is someone that performs and completes a task for the business. We now have a second option for that, which is AI. Should HR be in charge of that resource the same way as a human being? AI is going to be a resource that is used to complete tasks. That's what human beings are. So HR actually stepping in and taking charge of that in terms of stuff like resource management, I don't think it's a million miles away from actually this is a pretty smart idea.
No, 100%. I mean, I think I'm kind of exactly the same view on that. So, as you say, you kind of recently open up these kind of smaller networking events into the US.
Yeah.
What do you know? What are the differences? What differences are you noticing between the conversations in the UK, the conversations in the US, if indeed there are any differences?
I think certainly with our first time going over and people not really knowing what the network was all about, getting people open up first of all was a little bit difficult. I'm in a room with my competitors, inverted commas, and not realizing that actually this community is really built on trust and input, and that's what's built the UK and the Middle East. I don't think the challenges are a million miles away from where we are in the UK. I think that their market is doing better than ours right now, so there's more hiring still going on. I think they've got certain industries that just seem bulletproof, like healthcare right now, that isn't going away, which I don't really see in the UK at all. I think the conversation is very, very similar. I think again, there's the nervousness and excitement about AI. I think obviously, they've got the tariff situation in the US as well. Their political system or political situation is a lot more explosive than ours. Ours is bad, but at least we're bad and we know where we are. Theirs seems to be kind of bare and bore on a constant basis. So, and also look, when you've got laws that are made statewide and that authority is going back more to the state, it becomes quite difficult to start to plan out things like, workforce and hiring when you don't know from one day to the next who's going to be in charge of governing the laws in that state.
No, absolutely. And we'll just talk about RecFest in a second. But before we do, we've both been in this game for a very long time, and I know that, like me, you've seen the rise of the internet, the rise of social media, the rise of mobile, cloud computing, big data, whatever else it is. Do you think AI is following a similar pattern? Is it different? What's your kind of perspective based on all the changes that we've seen in the last, I'm going to say how many years it is, but it's quite a few.
I just usually follow you, Matt, to be fair. This is kind of, I just listen to what you say and then you slowly see it become reality years and years later. No, but seriously, and we're talking about this from a content point of view. Usually the content cycle over a 2 or 3 year period is you get people like yourself that come on stage and say, right, this is something to start thinking about, whether that was the internet, whether that was mobile, whether that was big data. And then the following year or the year after, you start to see these green shoots of actual companies using it. And that's where we're at right now. Last year was the hype year. Last year, all the stages were like, this is a thing, we all need to brace ourselves. Now you're starting to see some very real examples. And for me, I think you're seeing it a lot at the high volume end. And then not a lot, obviously, at the exec search end, and then there's a rainbow in between. And Johnny Campbell, who spoke when was in Chicago and Boston, Johnny used the example of McDonald's, and he said, if you imagine high volume hiring to be like McDonald's. Nowadays in McDonald's, you can walk in, and I'm just going to steal Johnny's bit, by the way, as well, because I really like it. You can walk into McDonald's, you can touch a screen, you can add 2 patties, you can add cheese, and then you don't see the human being until they hand over your food in some situations. That's kind of where high volume is right now. You're seeing a lot of companies reduce down their headcount massively, implementing technology like Mackie and Paradox and these sorts of technologies that are just augmenting their best recruiters, and they're losing people from the recruitment. Now whether or not they are putting them in different parts of the business or not, I have no idea. But you're seeing that at a high volume level. Then if you go to the other end of the spectrum, exec search and senior hiring is more like going into a fine dining restaurant. You wouldn't expect to push a button when you go into somewhere where you're going to pay £90 for a steak, right? You want the full experience. So kind of if you imagine that as being the spectrum of AI, we're starting down here a lot. There's a lot going on. And then it's only a matter of time between that and when you're at the top there, and when does the robot take over from the human being?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I did think that, I can't remember the name of it. There's a famous Russian restaurant in London where each table has a champagne button that you press. But other than that, I'm kind of with you there. So let's talk about RecFest. So there'll be people listening who may not have heard of RecFest. So what is it? Where is it? Why is it?
What is it? Where is it? Why is it? So let's go from the beginning. What is it? So it's a genuine outdoor festival. It's there are a lot of events in our industry that call themselves festival and are a conference room with bunting nicely. You've got in the UK over 100 speakers, yourself being one of them. It's kind of I suppose it's part education because it's obviously very content heavy. It's part discovery because you also get to meet a lot of vendors and see new technologies. It's part team day out, team bonding day, because actually with the rise of work from home, people are now putting this in their diaries as, okay, if we're going to meet up once a quarter, let's make one of them RecFest, and they come in their teams. Although we are seeing that shrink slightly, and that's in the UK, certainly. US is still growing, but in the UK, we're seeing this year certainly smaller teams. And that's based on lack of headcount. They're just not there. So when we go to them and say, hey, you had 20 tickets last year, do you want to buy 20? No, we want 12. It's like, okay, it's not a budget thing. You just don't have that many recruiters anymore, which is, a really interesting, So I think you've got So yeah, it's part kind of away day, it's part education, it's part discovery, it's all emotion. It seems to be sort of the happiest day in the year for most people in talent acquisition. They catch up with everyone they know, they see their colleagues probably for the first time in a while. So it is that real celebration aspect of it, and that's something we've always been very big on. Talent acquisition is a very unsung, sometimes downtrodden market, especially right now when so many people have lost their jobs because there's no hiring going on, and we went through the whole pandemic thing, and then it came out of the pandemic, and then everyone got hired again, everyone got loads of money, and then it went away again. So it's kind of needed now more than ever. So UK, it's July the 10th. I think in the US we're in Tennessee in October. So going back a little bit this year, from September. So that was mainly because the venue we were using last year is now at capacity. We can't get any more people in there. It was a state-run park, so they just refused us access to any more people in there. So we've now moved locations somewhere we can get a few more people in, and that's growing in the US. The US is I've said before, we've probably hit capacity in the UK in terms of how many more people we can get. We've probably got around 15% of the UK TA market in one event at one time, which is pretty unheard of from a trade show. US, we've still got a lot of headroom to go. So we're still seeing growth on the numbers of people attending. But yeah, US is a fun market. The vendor market is absolutely huge over there compared to the UK and Europe. So it's going to be great.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about going to RecFest is talking to people who have gone for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, it actually is a festival." It's like outside and everything like that. That's kind of amazing. And I spoke at the very, very first one where we were in that room with all those fake sunflowers. Just as a final question, why a festival? Why did you do it like that? Where did the vision come from?
I suppose if you remember events back in our day, they were very tired.
In our day?
Back in our day, yes, when everything was black and white, as
a
my
while
son
ago,
tells me.
a while ago.
A while ago. Events just didn't have any personality to them. They were very stuffy. They were very regurgitate content, and all the stuff we spoke about before. I just thought festivals are about the human connections you have, for me anyway, and then the music secondary. I always love the music when you go to a festival, but it is that encapsulated experience. It's a bubble. It's not the real world. You're in this la la land for a few days where you can morning drink and listen to Led Zeppelin in the afternoon. That's kind of, it's not a real world. So we wanted to create exactly. Yeah. So we wanted to create something like that, something that was a complete full experience, because we wanted that experience to stay with people. I think too many of our events nowadays are transactional. If you've been to one, you've been to all of them. A lot of the Vegas ones are starting to look very similar now. You couldn't really tell where you were when you were dropped into it. So we wanted to do something unique. And it's pure stupidity, because no one would do an outdoor event in the UK because it rains a lot. Why would you do that? We've got away with it for quite a few years. So touch wood, it continues. But yeah, it's just about being different and wanting to stand out and create something that stays with people for a while. And it certainly does.
And where can people find out more? Where can they get tickets from?
RecFest.com. So that's for both RecFest events, Nashville, which is a very fun town, and Nebworth, which is Stevenage, which is not as fun as Nebworth, but it's a big field.
Quite iconic. You don't have to go to Stevenage to go to Nebworth.
No, you don't. Stevenage is known as the Nashville of the UK. So,
Jamie, thank you very much for talking to us, and best of luck with the events this year.
Thanks, sir.
Hey, Rona, welcome back. So, resumes. Tell us all about it.
Oh, my favorite topic. So we've done episodes on AI interview policies, on social profiles and hiring, and even on the rise of the office influencer. And all of them point to one thing. The traditional resume is slowly being replaced by you. Or more specifically, by how you show up online. Because it's 2025 and your personal brand is really doing more work than your resume ever did. Boring. I hate resumes, by the way. I'll just put it out there. 2-page document listing your past jobs. It's really now competing with LinkedIn Live post and like speaking clips, short form videos, and portfolio links. We're not just reading about your experience anymore. We're like watching it. You're talking about how you think, you're showing your process, you're teaching others. And that's really what builds trust. And trust is what gets people hired. And I think what pushed us to this was really remote work and opening the borders of it. There's lots of competition for jobs. So like even AI is reinforcing this. Tools like ChatGPT are really helping candidates write cleaner resumes, but the smartest ones are really using ChatGPT to help them with their content strategy, to prep scripts, and to tell better stories online. And recruiters, even though they won't admit it, or most of them, they're watching. They're not just looking at resumes, they're checking digital presence, how you engage, what you're known for, what your vibe is. And many of you know I run a video content agency called Perceptible Studios, and we're seeing a lot more job seekers reach out, and we don't market to job seekers. And it's not just executives. I'm seeing manager level, director level reaching out and wanting to work with us for their video content strategy and their content strategy in general. So are resumes trending or ending? I hope that they're ending, because the best candidates today, they're not really relying on a paper that can't explain who you are. They are telling people, this is who I am, this is how I think, and here's the proof. What do you think, Matt?
So, as I said right at the beginning, I first wrote my first piece on I hope the CV goes away was in 2008. So I have been waiting for what I hope is this moment for a really really long time. And I don't think, if deep down, even though some recruiters swear by resumes, it doesn't stack up. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous that is how the restrictions in terms of how people can come across, and also what little useful data there actually is in terms of determining whether someone's going to be good at that job. So I think what first kind of prompted me to think about this was when LinkedIn launched. So, which I think was about 20 years ago, because it was like, well, hang on a minute, this is your kind of resume online, but it's kind of, we didn't have the feed and the content then, but there was the kind of the interaction between people. There was groups, there were things going on. So, you know, I think if we had a time machine and went back to old me, younger me, I'd be absolutely just flabbergasted and hugely disappointed that we still have resumes now. But I think that I think one of the reasons, I think there's reasons why we have them now, and there's reasons why they're going away now. So one of the big reasons we have them now is just these cultural norms around recruitment. And I've said this before, it's like everyone out there has written a resume and applied for a job and has a job. And everyone goes through that process. And I think particularly with hiring managers and, you know, senior execs, there's just a sense that is how recruitment is done. So you have to have a resume, you have to have this. And I think, you know, when people are leaving school or leaving college, their parents will say to them, you have to have a resume, you have to it's good for your CV. So there's a whole kind of cultural piece that I think is the reason why they've stuck around for so long. I had a conversation with, I had a podcast conversation with Jeff Taylor, who founded Monster, about this, and I actually spoke to him at Unleash about this over coffee. We were sort of talking about it for a long time. You know, these things have been around for 200 years, if not longer. So I think there are reasons why they're still here, but I think the reasons why they're going away, it's just, we're in a world where people can get AI to write their resume for them. So any kind of differentiation that might be there, that recruiters think they've got the instincts to spot when someone's lying or when someone's overplaying something, all of that's going away. And then I think we need to look and say, well, actually, if we're moving to skills first hiring and thinking differently about talent, this doesn't really help. There is so much science out there about why resumes are useless, and there are much better ways of assessing people. And I think all of these things are converging to hopefully kill the resume. So I think it's on its way out. Probably back in 20 years, still talking about it, but I think it's on its way out. So, I mean, drilling down into the content piece in terms of how people show up and all that sort of stuff, I think that there is I don't know whether to call it a generation gap here or a digital content savvy gap. But obviously, there are people who are very good at this. Just you look at some of the professional content that's on Instagram and TikTok in terms of people sort of profiling their job and their point of view and their achievements. There's some amazing stuff there. But likewise, there are lots of people who aren't very good at this. Now, they're not necessarily all older, but it's just, I suppose particularly in Britain, there's this whole thing about pushing yourself forward and being out there. It's not a very British thing to do. And I do see lots of people who are looking for jobs in our sector, who aren't really showing up online in the way that I'd expect. They're either not kind of putting themselves out there, or they're putting themselves out there just in a post every 3 months saying, hey, I'm still looking for a job. These are all things I can do. Or they're just putting content out there that doesn't actually really showcase their achievements. It's more about just drawing attention to them and hoping people will then ask for their CV. So what would your advice be to people in terms of how they can kind of show up and get that attention and get their, build their brand and get that across?
Yeah. I always tell people focus on what you want to be known for. And again, it doesn't have to be this thing that never changes. I've been known for many things because I've changed and done many different things throughout my career. But you made a good point. People think, oh, I have to do content on LinkedIn. And then they go and they just share whatever. There has to be a strategy. And strategy doesn't mean you have to hire a strategist like me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if you want a job if you want a job at a help desk answering technical questions, your content needs to be about how you answer technical questions and showing people that you know something about the tech that you're trying to answer questions
or
for.
getting people to ask you technical questions.
Yeah, it can't be like do an AMA, do something like that, comment on people's things. And that's the other thing. People think content means, oh, now I have to create these videos, I have to have a podcast. No. Right? There's a lot of people whose entire content strategy is commenting on other people's posts. You go to their profile and there's not a single post from them. It's resharing, adding their opinion and commenting on people's things. That is content. So I always tell people start small. But don't comment on, like, if I wanted a job, again, back to help desk, I'm not commenting on something about, I don't know, sharks and whales and stuff like that. Like that a recruiter is going to go to your profile and be like, oh, this is a person who knows a lot about sharks. This is not an IT help desk person. So they're going to move on. So be intentional about your strategy and what you're doing online. Like, I get it. I see a lot of stuff online that I want to comment on. That's why I have my personal Instagram and stuff like that where, oh my gosh, you will see all of my interest and I'll comment on all the Real Housewives shows and all of that. You will likely not see that on LinkedIn unless they're somehow relevant to what I want to be doing. Like if there's a Real Housewives episode about someone talking about video, it's going to be all over my LinkedIn, trust me.
Yeah.
But if it's not, then it has no place there. So it's not a resume, right? It's not the traditional resume, but just like you wouldn't put things not relevant to your work on your resume, think about that with your content strategy and don't put things not relevant to what you want to be doing and what you want to be known for out there for social media.
I think there is a bit though about showing that you're a human being and not a robot, and kind of, maybe kind of just having a slightly broader sort of perspective on that.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you only talk about work, right? But you find how to talk about your personal stuff. Like, yeah, definitely you can put stuff about your personal life and things that are important to you, as long as you can tie it back, or as long as that's going to shape how you're being seen professionally.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's kind of like I suppose it's almost like the YouTube algorithm. So I think if you go and look at the most successful YouTube channels, get my words right, you instantly know what that's about, even though that content creator might have lots of 500 videos, but you can just see straight away this is about this is it's very, very clear. And I think that's would that be kind of a good way to describe it?
Yes, that is an absolutely perfect way to describe it because yes, it doesn't mean it. And I'm glad that you asked this clarifying question because sometimes when I say like, oh, be sure to write about what you want to be known for, people think, oh no, I'm all now this robot that all I do is work. No, you're still human. But again, it's how you want to present yourself professionally. That's what should be out there. That should be your content strategy. And yeah, definitely have a pillar about things that are not specifically your area of expertise, but that show your professional presence or your opinion or your humanity in some
Yeah.
way relevant.
Or even your skills in a different way, basically. Because
Yeah.
I also think that we are heading. I think the other thing here is we're heading to a point where everyone has AI. Soon, everyone will be able to use it properly. That's when it really gets scary. So there's a bit about differentiation. It's like, how do you stand out? And ultimately, the only way you can stand out is by being yourself. But it's by being yourself in a very, in a kind of a way that works digitally and gets your message across, I would say.
In the same way that you bring your whole self to work, that's what you should be doing online.
Absolutely. Rona, thank you very much for talking to us, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Okay, so that's the end of another show. I finished my Doom bar. I'm going to go and have another one. It's got no alcohol in it, so that's fine. There are great shows coming up every day of the week, I think, on Purple Acorn. So there's the HR Morning Show, My First Job, From the Desk, From X to Z. Some really great stuff there. So make sure you check out purpleacornnetwork.com and also the Purple Acorn YouTube. I'm obsessed with YouTube now. The Purple Acorn LinkedIn page. So make sure you follow and you'll be able to see all the shows live and recorded on there. Thank you to everyone who has been watching, and thanks to everyone who's also watching this on the catch up. If you want to check out my longer form interviews, you can check them out on my podcast, Recruiting Future. And while you're there, you can also find the Alder Hour and all the other Purple Acorn shows on your podcast podcast provider of choice, so wherever you listen to your podcast. The Alder Hour will be back possibly next Monday, if not the Monday afterwards, and either way I am already looking forward to it. So this is Matt Alder clocking out.